Fiona Andrews. I work for the North Yorkshire charity Dementia Forward. So we cover the whole of North Yorkshire, and that includes York as well. You've got to say York because it's not part of North Yorkshire Council. What you see on the screen there is how you can contact us. So that's our helpline number. And that's probably the easiest way to get in touch with us, that telephone number on the screen. We're a one-stop shop, so we don't make things complicated. If you want us, just ring that number. And I am going to talk through on the next slide what it is that we do, because we do a lot. Now, when people think about dementia and support, mostly they will think about the Alzheimer's Society, but we are not the Alzheimer's Society. So if you go to the Alzheimer's Society, you will not get referred to us. That just doesn't happen. So make sure that if you need our help, you come directly to us. I'm going to tell you what we do, because we are a really, really great, thorough charity with a lot of depth. You get fantastic support by us. So if you have a look at this, what we try to do is we try to leave no gaps in the support that we do, but obviously there are areas where we can't fill those gaps. So for example, we can support people who are AWOC, but that's not our speciality. So we're always looking to work with partners who can specialise in certain areas so that we can confidently refer people to them for that additional support whilst they're being supported by us at the same time. So we support people pre-diagnosis. You do not have to have any medical diagnosis to come through to Dementia Forward. We know that it can be incredibly difficult even wanting to have a diagnosis. You know, a lot of people don't even want to go down that route. And we also know that even if you do go down that route, it can sometimes take a long time. We have in some areas a whole hour's wait, a whole year's wait on a memory clinic. So we support people before any official diagnosis. And what we do is we run, and we've got several in York, what we call brain health cafes. So they are specifically designed, and we work with health to support people pre-diagnosis, whether they want a diagnosis or not. And this is all pro-brain health. So we have guest speakers who come in every week to talk about brain health. And every fourth week, we have somebody from the memory clinic there who comes in to talk about the memory clinic process. But of course, a lot of our work comes post-diagnosis. You have a diagnosis, and then you get referred to us if you want that. And we support you through all of that. And that's from, pre-diagnosis right through to end of life. The way that we support is that if you ring us, you will get a support advisor who will make contact with you, and they will come and meet you. And usually that will be in your own house with as many people as you want there, the whole family there, or friends or neighbours or whoever who want to support you through your dementia journey. And we get all of your paperwork and stuff out of the way first. Have you got your power of attorney sorted? Have you applied for all of your benefits? If you've never applied for benefits in your life, it's an incredibly difficult process to do that. So we can help you do all that stuff. You need to have your will updated. Have you got your blue badge sorted? Have you got your council tax reduction sorted? So we go through all of that stuff with you. Once we've got all of that sorted, well, then we are looking at what do you need in your life in order to live well? And if we can't provide it, we go out and we find it. We look for it. We look for support groups. We look for activities. We look for things and people and organisations that we can refer you into. Because dementia, from our perspective, is all about living well with dementia. And I don't know whether any of you saw that Alzheimer's Society advert that was on the TV recently. That was all about kind of you die if you can't make a Sunday dinner, and then you die when you can't remember your friends, and you die and it was an incredibly negative advert, and it caused quite a lot of concerns to quite a lot of our clients. And that is not us. With us, we really encourage living well. And if you want us, it goes direct to our helpline. We also have a huge wellbeing and respite services. So we run our own wellbeing services, our young onset days out, our cafes, our hub clubs, which are day centres with highly skilled support activity workers there who give you a full day of respite, and it obviously gives the carer a day of respite as well. But we also look to partners in order to kind of refer into. If there's a great coffee place doing great afternoons there of, you know, luncheon clubs and things like that. We want to know about stuff like that as well. And that's me in the middle there, the community engagement, awareness and education team. And we also have a specialist young onset dementia support. So that specifically supports people who are under the age of 65 with the dementia. And then we carry on with our support, and we do support once a person moves into a care home, if that's what happens. So look at our website and give us a ring if you want any more information about any of that. But let's crack on and just talk about what dementia is and what it is that we need to do in order to live well with dementia. But we also know now that there are ways that we can live our lives that can reduce the risk of us picking up a dementia later on, or can actually prevent it altogether. So research has shown that up to 40% of dementias can be prevented, or at the very least, they can be delayed. And really what I would like to say here is that dementia, we look at it as being an old person's disease. We look at it as being an old person's illness, and it isn't. Dementia is a young person's illness, a young person's disease. We just see the manifestation of that when people get older. So if we can start to live well earlier on in our lives, well, then we give ourselves a better chance. But if you get older, there are still things that you can do to stave it off. Or if you have got it, to push it back and for you to live well and better with this disease. So there's lots and lots of dementias out there, but the 5 most common ones are on the screen there if you can see them. And so the most common dementia is Alzheimer's disease. And that accounts for well over half, up to 70% of all the dementia. So most people, when they talk about dementia, are talking really about Alzheimer's dementia. But you could have another type of dementia. You could have vascular dementia, and most people have heard of that. Now, these dementias, they present very differently. So we need to know the difference between these dementias in the early stages. We have Parkinson's, which can be a form of dementia and which catches a lot of people out. And if you do have a Parkinson's dementia, the way that that will present will be most likely like the Lewy body type dementia that we see on the screen there. So let me just show you a little bit of difference here. Alzheimer's disease is gradual. It comes upon us over time. So you don't see many changes in the person from 1 week to the next, from 1 month to the next. It's slow and it's gradual, but it's progressive. But something like vascular, which affects the cardiovascular system, and it can be brought about through strokes and hemorrhages and things like that, they can come on really quickly. You can see that really quickly happening. So even these 2 most common types of dementia can present very, very differently. With Parkinson's, we normally associate Parkinson's with the physical changes that you see in the person, with the tremors. But we know that Parkinson's can start decades before you actually see the tremors occur. And research now is looking at how we might be able to pick up Parkinson's a lot easier and quicker, and start putting interventions into place, maybe decades before the tremor even becomes apparent. But Lewy body's dementia, which we associate with Parkinson's, what you will see here is hallucinations, paranoias, delusions. That's Lewy body dementia. And you can have Lewy body dementia as a dementia in its own right. But as you progress into the further and further into that dementia, you will pick up Parkinson's type symptoms. So there's a real overlap there. And then we have frontotemporal dementia. That's where this part of the brain, your frontal lobe, is damaged quite early on. And these parts of the brain, see, they're your temporal lobes. Lots of younger people have this as their first dementia. But of course, older people can have that too. Your frontal lobe is really significant. It's all of your higher executive skills. We see damage really quickly with Alzheimer's disease of the frontal lobe. And that's why we'll see people who will lose those executive skills. They will lose things like decision making. You know, the thing that we do as an adult, we make good decisions because we didn't make good decisions when we were younger. And this is a very new part of our brain. It's built throughout our lives, and it reaches full maturity when you get to about early 30s, late 20s. It's why younger people don't really make very good decisions until you've made a lot of bad ones and you realize what a good decision is. Planning is up here. And once again, some younger people, you know, you think of your teenagers and stuff, they probably don't plan very well. And once again, until you've lived a life of not planning very well and felt the consequences of that and built that into your frontal lobe, then it comes about when you get to your late 20s, early 30s, you just learn how to plan better. You go out with the correct shoes on, you take a pack up. if you know that there's no cafe or coffee shop around. You put your big coat on if you check the weather report and you see that it's going to be cold and rainy. We plan in our lives. It's our judgment as well. When we get to a certain age, we know how to judge people in circumstances a lot better than when we're younger. We know people who we can trust and people who we know for a certain fact that that's a bit of a scam. So that's all up here in the frontal lobe. Also up here is things like social etiquette. We want to fit in with our peers. So we behave in a way when we're around people that makes us acceptable, makes people like us. We say things that we know are not going to offend people. We do things that we know are not going to be rude and offensive. All that's up here in the frontal lobe. So that's fine when our frontal lobe is healthy. But when we start to lose this in dementia, that's the signs and the symptoms that you're going to see. I ain't going to plan very well. I'm going to make bad decisions. I might say things and do things that are out of context, that are not aligned with my values. And you might think that I've just become a cranky old woman or a cranky old man, when actually it's dementia that's actually taken that function away from me. There's a lot of overlap. You've got no excuse, Neil. There's a lot of overlap with all of these dementias. So when you die of a dementia, there is nearly always not just a pure pathology in the brain. There's a lot of different pathologies that jump on board. And with Alzheimer's disease, you'll nearly always have some vascular issues. With vascular dementia, you'll nearly always have Alzheimer's disease. You know, with Parkinson's, you will have Alzheimer's, you'll have vascular. So there's a big overlap. It's as if there's a bit of a syndrome that takes place in the brain, and all of a sudden the healthy stuff kind of turns in on itself and starts to damage and destroy the brain. So we need to know how the brain works in order to realize what happens when it breaks down, but what we can do to kind of keep it healthy. So if we have a look at this screen, the outer cortex of our brain, that's the bit under the skull, it's our grey matter, and that's where all of our neurons, all of our brain cells are held. And we have about 100 billion brain cells, and each brain cell has about 1,000 connections. So really we have about 100 trillion connections in our brain. So when we start with dementia, we ain't going to lose that all at once. And that's dead. You know, that's what we really need to hold on to here. We don't lose everything all at once. The way that the brain cells operate, if you have a look at that slide on the left-hand side, is the brain cells pick up information from usually an external source. So I look at something and I like it and I want to eat it. So it passes information into the brain, into the body, that allows me to recognize what it is, put my arm out, pick it up and eat it, knowing that it's safe and it tastes nice. And that's because these brain cells are picking up the information, putting it into the brain, passing the information all the way around the brain and the body, and allowing me to do the things that I do without even thinking about it. These brain cells, though, have to get close enough to the other brain cells in order to pass those messages across, because they fly around the brain like electrical current, and then when they meet, they change to a chemical reaction, if you like, and it's this neurotransmitter that actually passes the information from one brain cell to the next. So it has to get close enough to pass that piece of information. I have to be able to look at the cake and to know that I like to eat it. The brain needs to understand what I'm seeing. It then needs to be able to pass the information to my body so I can reach out and take a hold of it. And then I need to understand where it goes. I need to be able to put it into my mouth. I then need to be able to chew it and swallow it. They're all really complex actions, these. So the brain and the body has to be really connected and well tied together in order for us to do this. But what happens with dementia, and this is kind of Alzheimer's type pathology, but other dementias move down the same pathological route, is that we all have proteins in our brain, and these proteins keep our brains healthy. But with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, the proteins go rogue and they stop protecting the brain and they start to damage and destroy it. So with Alzheimer's disease, you might have heard of a protein called beta amyloid. And beta amyloid is the protein that misfolds. So proteins all have a shape and they need to stick to this shape in order for them to do their function. But these proteins, they start to misshape and they start to clump together. And these clumps start to form outside of the brain cells, and we call those plaques. So if you remember what the brain cells have to do, they have to meet and connect in order to pass messages. But what we have now is we've got plaques that are now accumulating outside of the brain cells and causing disruption to that pathway. I now can't really get the message from one brain cell to the next as easily as I used to. And this is an accumulation. This is a progressive thing that occurs. These plaques, they just keep coming. And in the early stages, they're very small. We probably don't even know that they're there, because we know that Alzheimer's disease can start to occur decades before the symptoms become apparent. So in the early stages, we can kind of come across a plaque, and our brain cell can kind of reverse and work its way around and find another route round. But as more and more of them come, that becomes more and more difficult. And these are when you're going to see the signs of people slowing down a bit. Oh, that quickness, that fast fire that I used to have in my brain just isn't there anymore. I'm now finding it difficult to get that information across. And of course, as more and more of these plaques occur, I'm really going to struggle getting that information across. Now, even when I reverse and I try to take the long route round, more and more pathways are just blocked off. It's taken me ages to process information now, when I used to get it really, really quickly. And tau is another protein that used to protect the brain cell. And we have like lots of protective mechanisms in the brain, but tau protected the brain cell. It made it healthy and the structure strong. But when the plaques start to occur, all of a sudden the tau goes rogue as well, and it turns in on itself and it destroys the brain cell. So we have a process called neurodegeneration. We have brain cells dying off, and then also plaques that are not letting the information get through. So when we mention it like that, you can see, can't you, how this catastrophe is occurring in the brain and how things are slowing down and becoming very, very difficult. It doesn't happen all at once, and there are things that we can do to actually push this back. So that's what we're going to go on to in a minute. Vascular dementia is different from the plaques and the tangles. And the way that I describe vascular dementia is it's all about your plumbing. It's about your pipes, right? So at home, if you to turn your tap on, you want the water to be gushing through. That's healthy pipes. And that's basically what we need in our body, up to our brains. Healthy pipes, healthy plumbing, if you like. We want things to move about easily and quickly. We don't want any blockages. So we don't want to turn our taps on at home and have a little trickle of water come out, because we've got a blockage somewhere. And if we turn the tap on and no water comes out at all, well, then we've got a real problem going on here. And that is really vascular dementia. We need to keep the pipes open. And there are ways that we can do that. So can I reduce my risk? Yes, you can. But remember that this is risk. So we could do everything that I'm going to talk to you about and still get it. Or we might do none of it and not get it, because it's a risk factor. But it's a risk worth taking, because up to 40% can be prevented or delayed. First of all, we need to look after our heart. So remember the vascular dementia, it makes up about 20% of all dementias. And we know that if you get vascular dementia, that Alzheimer's can jump on the back of that. So this is the one that can come on really suddenly. So remember your strokes, your hemorrhages, but it's the one that we've got some control over, because we can make our heart healthy. If we're living our lives in a way that's making our heart unhealthy, we need to try to reverse that so that we keep our plumbing nice and healthy and clear for the stuff to get through that needs to get through. But this needs to start mid-life to have the maximum benefit. And I'm really sorry to tell you that midlife starts at what age, Sue? 80. 80. Not really right. But I admire your optimism. So midlife starts at 35. Yeah, I know. Feel really cheated when I heard that. I was like, surely it's 55, but it's not, it's 35. And that kind of makes sense a bit, really, doesn't it? But that doesn't mean to say that over the age of 35, you've missed the boat. There are everything that you do in order to prevent your heart from missing out on this is beneficial, regardless of what age you are at. So what can we do? We can exercise. Exercise has huge benefits for your heart. We know that, don't we? There's huge vascular benefits to your heart. And really what we need to be doing is moving about around 25 minutes per day of aerobic exercise. So most of you who came here today, if you got the bus or you got parked your car up and you walked here, you've probably walked for 25 minutes and then you've walked up the steps. If you got out of breath, well, then that's a really good thing. We need to have it aerobic. And because what happens then is we are increasing the blood flow. Remember your pipes. If you're pushing the blood through there, you're keeping the pipes healthy. It's also the most natural anti-inflammatory that you can have is exercise. And so we know that inflammation in the body and in the brain can cause all sorts of problems. So this is a very natural way to keep inflammation as low as we can. And remember the amyloid, the beta amyloid proteins, the plaques that accumulate in the brain. Exercise can reduce the deposition of amyloid plaques in the brain. So we've got people looking at how to medicate against this. What pills can we take? What injections can we give people to reduce beta amyloid? And exercise can actually do that totally free of charge. So this slide, this is us thousands of years ago, our hunter-gatherer times. And when we were in our hunter-gatherer times, we would walk or move about between 10 and 15 kilometers every day. That was just normal for us back then. There was no public transport, there was no cars or anything like that. The average American nowadays moves around about, so I'm going to ask you again.
1 mile if you're lucky.
300 meters. 300 meters. That's what research has shown, that the average American moves about 300 meters. And that's the equivalent of getting out of bed, walking downstairs, getting into your car, driving to work, sitting at your desk all day, driving back and sitting around and watching the TV all night, I would imagine. So we've become more sedentary. And we need to move about more. I don't know about you, but like when I was younger, my mum and dad would never drive me around anywhere, but my kids expect me to be driven around anywhere nowadays. We had to walk, we had to cycle, otherwise we never got there. Nutrition, we need to eat a healthy diet. So once again, years ago, I remember going out to my grandma's house and everything was from the allotment. You know, they had an allotment and all of the neighbours had allotments and they shared all the food. And my grandma didn't have a fridge, everything went in the pantry. So you ate it quick, otherwise it went off. So everything was seasonal and everything was fresh. There was no such things as pizzas back then, KFCs, McDonald's, or anything that we're feeding our children nowadays. And so although kind of we know all of this stuff, we really need to, you know, make sure that our kids are getting the best benefits from this. The younger generation are getting, you know, educated that they can prevent dementia later on in life by exercising, which we're not making very easy for them, are we? Taking away all the school playing fields and making exercise probably quite expensive. And healthy eating can be quite expensive as well. We need to do that better. I also think we've lost touch of the seasons. You know, my daughter's a baker, and she said to me in December, I went into Tesco's and there was no strawberries. And I was like, because it's December. But our kids nowadays just expect everything to be there. They don't realise that food's seasonal and we just need to re-educate, don't we? But once again, the only way that our brain's going to be healthy is the food that we feed it. So we need to feed it good stuff in order for our brain to have it. We need to cut out smoking and alcohol as much as possible, and everybody has a little bit of a chuckle at this slide. But I don't know of many people who smoke nowadays, but there's a lot of young kids vaping, and I don't know what the vaping thing's going to look like later on. But alcohol, we see quite a lot of people with a condition called Korsakoff's, which is you know, alcohol-related brain damage that we can get later in life.
Grape juice is one of your
Neil says it's grape juice, and technically he is right. So yeah, it just increases the rate of stroke, and of course we just try not to get a stroke. We try not to do anything that compromises our cardiovascular system, aren't we? So yeah, in moderation, I would imagine, but yeah. And head injury, this is where we see in all the sporting bodies now starting to look at reducing head injury. You know, I think Scotland's introduced that kids can't head a ball under the age of 12, and all of the rugby teams now have got processes in place so that concussion is taken seriously, whereas, you know, years ago you just had a sponge squeezed over your head and as soon as you came around you were thrown straight back on the rugby pitch again, weren't you? You know, and that's exactly what these people wanted. You know, they wanted to play this sport, and we still want to watch that sport, but we want it to be done in a way that lowers the risk of having problems with your brain later on in life, because we have seen in the sporting world, I think out of all of the 1966 World Cup team, I think 10 out of the 11 of them had some kind of Alzheimer's type disease when they died. And that can't just be coincidental, I don't think, can it? We need to look after our hearing and sight. So, you know, your hearing and your sight goes as you age, doesn't it? And it can creep up on you. But if we can optimize it as much as we possibly can, go and get your prescriptions done, make sure that your eyes are as healthy as possible, and go and get your ears tested. And if you need hearing aids, put them in. You know, put your batteries in as well. That's always helpful. Because we know that socialization is a big thing. As we get older, we have to socialize, we have to get out and we have to meet people and we need to chat and we need to formulate groups such as this, where there's a little bit of a fear factor of like, who's going to be around, you know, as I get older. Well, this group, for a start off, is a really good starting point, isn't it? But we can probably only maximize that benefit if we can hear them, we can see the people in the room. So just try to make sure that we look after our eyes and our ears. And this is a great one, cognitive stimulation. I just need to tell you at this point that all of this research information has come from decades of studies. And these studies have been linked to brain donation programs. So right back from the 1980s, we started a system of research that was linked to brain donation. So people signed up to these programs. And then when they died, they donated the brain. The brain was looked into to see what was happening. And then we looked to see how did that person live their lives? And was there any correlations between the way that people lived that made them more susceptible to getting a dementia later on or not? And this one came out as kind of top trumps, really. And this is lifelong learning. So if you kind of encourage your brain throughout your life to learn new things, fun things, because obviously we learn better if we are interested in it and it's fun. What we're doing is we are constantly building more neural connections in our brain. So in effect, we are getting a bigger, healthier brain. We're keeping the pipes open and we're actually building more of our brain. There is a massive influx of dementia. So the prevalence of dementia worldwide is huge and it's growing. The prevalence of dementia in the first world, in the European nations, is huge and it's growing. But the incident rates, the new cases coming through over the last 20 to 25 years in the first world countries is on the decrease. And in the UK, it's been on the decrease by about 25%. So yeah, there's a lot of it, but we have got a bit of a grasp on it, but we need to keep that going, don't we? We need to encourage our kids to keep that downward spiral going. So we know that people who stay at school and go through college and university have a lower risk of dementia. People who have a cognitively stimulating job have a lower rate of dementia. People who have a cognitively stimulating retirement activity have a lower rate. So just being around people and stressing your brain, if you like, can actually build your brain. And what happens is we have a thing called cognitive reserve. So that is a reserve part of our brain. So as part of this donation program, we found that there were some people, when they looked in their brains, found that there was quite a lot of dementia pathology, quite a lot of plaques and tangles in the brain on post-mortem. But the way that the person had lived their lives, you wouldn't really have noticed that too much. And I was like, why is that? And what they came to the conclusion was they had a bigger brain reserve. They had built up more of their brain as they went through life, so that even when a pathology did hit it later on, it didn't affect these people so much. So groups like this are crucial because meeting people and sitting and chatting builds your brain. It's as simple as that. You can always be encouraged as well when you come to groups like this to probably hydrate yourselves, drink a little bit. You've got to move about to get here. You're chatting, you've got to remember people's names and who does what. That all pulls on brain health. So groups like this are absolutely crucial for brain health and supportive techniques. So thanks ever so much, AWOC, for inviting me in here. I'm Fiona Andrews. If anybody wants to ask me any questions, you can. And if you don't want to, and you want to email me, you can always come through the charity if you'd like to do it that way as well. But thank you, Sue, for inviting us here.
You're welcome. Well done.
I'm going to stop share.